at another episode of Newcastle Unlocked. This is our second episode. And off the back of our first episode, we got a great response to that. And thanks everyone for their kind words. And a big part of why we're doing this is to promote investment in the hunter. We're very fortunate in the place that we live. We're rich in resources. We've got some great assets to promote growth. And we want to try and promote that to a national audience, but also remind us as locals that we're very fortunate to live where we live, and there's some great potential and a great economic profile to sell to the wider market. And there's no better person to help me sell Newcastle to the wider market than my guest that's joining me today. So Hilton Grugeon, prominent developer here in Newcastle, and has been awarded the prestigious Member of the Order of Australia for his economic contribution to the hunter. So thanks very much for joining us today, Hilton.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks very much. So it's been about 4 years since we caught up to go through a bit of a synopsis of the economic profile of Newcastle, and it was an interview that was very well received, and having revisited it last week in preparation for this meeting, it was a great synopsis of why to invest in the hunter. So when we went through that interview last time, we spoke about some of the attributes for Newcastle as a community, very resilient town. We've gone through quite a few changes. And since then till now, we've gone through a very disruptive period in our economic history. We've had COVID, we've had shutdowns. We've been in it together with the national and global markets. But how do you think Newcastle fared during COVID, and how do you think it's done post-COVID?
The COVID effect in Newcastle was as traumatic as it was anywhere from what I can understand. But coming through it was typical of the way this region responds to a hard time. And we've had both the natural disaster of the earthquake for Newcastle City itself, but then we've had the closure of the steelworks at the end of the last century. But Newcastle can go through all of that and still be thriving. There was a lot in the COVID period that created a lot of hardship with the hospitality industry in particular, but also much industry was very badly adversely affected. I myself in one of the owners of the airport hotel at the Williamtown Airport, and we were running at over 90% occupancy, and we were ready to build another 60 rooms on the 96 rooms we've got there. And within months we were closed because we just had nobody travelling through the airport, and we had to just shut down for a while. But of everything that I'm personally involved in, it was the only thing that had an adverse effect from COVID. But I know out there in the community it was very, very hard times, but we've come through it. And some of the benefits that came from COVID was an acceleration of additional infrastructure spending from the governments, which is a great thing to have happened and is still happening. If you look now at the major roadworks that are in progress now, you'll recall that when we had the GFC, the Hunter Expressway, that massive bit of infrastructure was put in place as part of the government spending to maintain the economy. Well, now we've got projects like the inner city bypass going all the way through beside the hospital down to Jesmond, and then you've got the new major bypass over which is another river crossing, a rail crossing, highway crossing out there at Beresfield through to Raymond Terrace. So they're massive infrastructure projects, and they've come about as part of government spending to alleviate the problems that COVID was creating. But as in always, the hunter's resilience has just been typical. When BHP closed, and that was going to be the end of the of an era, but it wasn't the end of the city. And of course, after the earthquake, the rebuilding of Newcastle has been into a university and prime residential suburb, whereas the traditional, we've still got the law courts and the things that go with that, but the hospitals all moved and so on, but it's just booming and booming and booming. A lot of the boom comes from internally, but then it's attractive to so many people from outside the region, particularly the inner city dwellings. So many of them are taken up by people from out of town who now find it to be a very attractive place to live and be part of that community.
Look, we've definitely proven our resilience again. We've gone through a number of disruptive periods, and this is just another one of them. We keep coming through, which is great. Just talking about some of the disruption during the COVID period or post-COVID period, the construction industry was under a lot of pressure, or has been under a lot of pressure, especially recently, with a number of businesses in trouble. But your businesses continue to forge on. You're still getting projects out of the ground when many aren't, due to feasibility, due to labour shortages, materials cost. What's your secret, and what's been your observation of the construction industry just during COVID, just to focus on that?
Well, possibly from your observations, you might be able to help me as to the secret. But the bottom line is the demand is there. The rises in values of the real estate has been commensurate with the rising in costs of production of it. And as more and more of the people from the big smoke spread out across the state, that's done tremendous things in changing not just Newcastle, but all the way through the Hunter and even into the country towns, where so many more people can live and work away from the big smoke. And so that's been done a lot for property values. We've had huge increases in the values of our industrial and commercial properties, even at a much faster rate than the residential, because the demand has just been increasing and increasing, and the new big industrial estate that is being constructed there at the junction of the M1 and the New England Highway and the Pacific Highway going north, that new estate, which will not be being built on for another 12 months, the values there for land have gone up from $400 a metre to $600, and there's still more demand than what that estate is being able to fill. Mind you, the land in Sydney of a comparable type has gone up in the last 10 years from $1,000 a metre to $2,000 a metre. But so the whole thing is very much connected. But it has made the investments here been really good. And when it comes to trading businesses, our diversity is such that the ones that are doing well are doing better. And the growth of things like our university, the growth of the opportunities that come from the flow down from that, and it's just expanding all the time. And maybe it's the worst kept secret, but the University of Newcastle won't be the only university in the Hunter Valley for much longer when it comes to a real offering. The training for young people, the TAFE facilities, and the growth of the apprenticeship offerings is just fantastic. There's no slowdown in that. It's increasing. And as hospitality gets back on its feet, and that means that those level of jobs, there's more and more of them. And a lot of those jobs, of course, are helping in keeping opportunities for people to be here studying at the university, apart from all those that are doing everything online.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on some of the diversity in our economy. You personally have continued to invest heavily. You haven't slowed down since we caught up. You continue to invest heavily in the hunter. Why do you choose to keep investing in the hunter? What's some of the driving reasons? Why should some of the people maybe that haven't invested in the hunter or are considering it, why should they invest in the hunter?
The diversity of it and the ability to do business. Like, take a port. Now, our port is going to eventually get back to container terminal. We lost that when the previous government sold the port by giving a sweetheart deal to the Port Botany container terminal. But it's got to the stage where Sydney is so congested that the cost of moving containers around in Sydney is much, much more than handling containers out of the port of Newcastle. And with the widening of the freeway to Sydney, you've got an enormous artery that blood can be flowing through during the night, which there's plenty of capacity there that's not going to take away from the insane rush of all these tradies and workers that have to rush into Sydney for work every morning. But night time, we've got that huge facility, that huge infrastructure that could be better utilised and will be and is being, because a lot of the growth around here is in the distribution and transport opportunity. But then you go to the other uses of the port. Sure, it is the biggest tonnage coal handling port in the world, and coal will not stop tomorrow. The use of coal will not stop tomorrow. And wherever coal is being used, we would much rather good, high quality, cleanest burning coal that is available in the Hunter. We'd rather have that used than the inferior coal from elsewhere in the world that creates more problems than Hunter coal. Eventually, though, one day we'll look back at coal the way that we look back at steam engines. Got us to a point. And then technology and the need to cut emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, that was the death knell for it. But it will not be tomorrow. In the meantime, of course, we've got the opportunity for this to become a hub, and it's on the radar for export of other energy like hydrogen. And that is something that is a real sleeping giant for us. Other uses of the port, they're coming through. They're coming along. And look at defence. The growth of the defence spending in this region, both in the manufacturing industries and the actual use of defence in the largest civil defence military fighter base in the country, right here in Newcastle, and it's growing at a huge rate. Couple with that the fact that as a secondary international airport, Newcastle hasn't hit its straps, but the major airports being Kingsford Smith and out there to the west now in Sydney still leave room for the market that's there that can use a secondary international airport. Look at London and the number of, they've got the two majors, but they've also got the smaller ones around there that are very, very lucrative for those communities and for those areas. Newcastle Airport has got a huge future in international tourism, more in the charter stroke holiday use. Then people don't have to be dropped into Sydney to enjoy a holiday in Australia. In fact, if you got dropped off at Williamtown, you could be in Sydney looking at the bridge as quick as if you came from the western suburbs of Sydney. Because out there, you've got all that huge congestion to deal with, and that congestion is not getting less.
Yeah. Look, some great points there, Hilton, and I think that you're absolutely right. Look, there's still a lot of future in coal, but beyond that, we're such a diverse economy now. We've got quite a few avenues to run, and I think that we're only going to go from strength to strength for all the reasons you spoke about. So, pivoting back to property, we've obviously talked about investing in the region, investing in the Hunter. What are you seeing out there in the property world at the moment? Where do you see the opportunities for the average investor to come in? Where are you seeing future growth potential? What are you investing in right now? Where do you see the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years for property?
Well, we're investing across the board, not because we're got any insights into it necessarily, but just from demand. There's a huge upswing in the demand for living for seniors.
Okay.
Our seniors in the area have gone up exponentially in percentage of population as the baby boomers all fit into that category and beyond. And whereas you might have growth of 10% in the population, we're having growth in our seniors of 24 and 25%. So that's a huge market which is catering for people from out of the area as well as from those within. Bearing in mind that every senior's home that's provided is somebody's home, family home in the suburbs existing that's then available for another family. So a lot of growth is in the residential market is underlaid by that elephant that's in the room, and that is the demand for good seniors living capability. Affordable housing, of course, for the whole of the nation is an issue, mainly because we have governments that can't help themselves. They keep improving things, but every time they bring about an improvement, in inverted commas, it comes at cost to the provision of housing. And sooner or later there will be the reckoning up that we'll have to have more result, more benefit from the improvements that have been brought into that market. But the residential threshold is so much lower than down the road. So whereas the Sydney market, you don't get much under $1.5 million. Up here, you can still get a lot under $1 million, which is good quality.
And how do you see affordable housing entering our market? They're talking build to rent in Sydney and the capital cities. How do you think they're going to fix the problem here? Because they're talking high density even around the train stations of the local suburbs, or is higher density the answer when construction costs are so high to get them out of the ground? Is it that they're going to need to somehow come up with an initiative to build lower cost housing? Where do you see the future of it for local markets like us?
Well, of course, Newcastle CBD is becoming a very large residential in very high density dwellings, but the quality is there and the quality of life that's going along with it is there. Further out where we're talking about going high rise within 400 metres of train stations and that sort of thing, it'll take a bit of adjusting to, but once it takes off, it will take off because it's more affordable than increasing the urban sprawl out into the outlying regions.
And so with construction costs, and I keep sort of pivoting back to that because they seem to be a barrier to a lot of this new development. Are you seeing with your various business interests a stabilising of construction costs? Are you seeing that they're going to be going down? Are you seeing that there's a path forward to try and get some of these projects out of the ground in the time frame we need it to?
time frame, of course, is a much bigger bearing on costs than most people realise. If you take long enough over anything you're doing, there'll be no profit in it at the end, and if there's no profit, it doesn't generate growth. Because what generates the growth, it's not the bright ideas in a politician's eye, in mind. It is the profit that's generated that can be reinvested and reinvested and reinvested. And the more times the same amount of money goes around in circles, but you delay that going around, and then you'll delay the benefits from it. We are working through all those issues constantly, because every time we sometimes liken local government, who are right at the coalface on letting things happen. I said letting things happen, not making things happen. Unfortunately for those people, time doesn't mean anything. But it's the time that the money is not able to go around that costs the whole community and the whole economy. So we have to get better at it, whereas we, but the opportunity is there. See, if you don't have the opportunity, there's no point in working hard to meet those demands. But the demands are there, and they're growing, and they're constantly growing. And, what a place to be where you've got all that.
A hot button topic, but do you think the councils are doing a good job for enabling development of land?
Most good things that happen in the Hunter, as throughout the whole of Australia, happen in spite of government, state, local council, state and federal, in spite of it rather than because of it. However, it's the best of a bad system, so we all work with it.
Very diplomatic answer there. Pivoting from residential to industrial, you've got interests and you've got a very strong track record of developing industrial estates. We were even talking about the Cardiff Industrial Estate when it was in its infancy, and the costs of construction played a role in enabling new development there and expanding that market. And the supply of land for industrial has been a driver in some of the prices that we're seeing. But as you pointed out, the prices in Sydney are still well and truly beyond what we've got in Newcastle. Where are you seeing the industry come to Newcastle for industrial? Is it logistics? Are you seeing anything else unique that we might not be seeing from the outside in?
It just keeps happening because it's happening. Nothing makes things happen like things happening. And things are happening. And that makes more things happen. Because and it's not just restricted to the lower Hunter. Like there is more demand in Singleton at a time when, hang on, they tell me the coal mining industry is pulling back. No, but there's still more demand there now than there was a few years ago. Even go further up the Hunter and get into the countryside. We've got huge demand in Tamworth, where what we thought was, 20 years of supply, in 5 years you look around and you're running out. But the other things that happen up in there, they've got different things driving their economy, but they're driving them. And there is more and more location again for a lot of businesses, relocation into the country, where people can live for the cost of living is less than in the outskirts of the capitals.
And looking at a more of a macro level, and just your thoughts on the year ahead, 2 years ahead, just from a market perspective, the talk of an interest rate cut at the end of the year, the goalposts keep changing when the inflation figures come out, CPI figures come out. How much of a short-term problem is this to long-term? What are you seeing for the next 12 months? Are you continuing to invest heavily? Are you holding back some cash? Is it something that you are putting a lot of thought to in the immediate term, or are you just getting on with business?
Well, one of the biggest businesses I'm involved in the last 2 years, tripled its EBITDA, and it was on a high level 2 years ago because it's involved in infrastructure and involved in material provision. But that's not unique. We run into it all the time. Not just that it's growing by the normal rates, it's just gone crazy. And the COVID, in part, has generated that as one of the outcomes.
Yeah, I suppose it's a question's on everyone's lips at the moment. Investors are at a bit of a standoff with buyers about yields and expectations. Although we ended the end of last year with what we thought was a market that was starting to quiet given the effects of the interest rates. But coming back into 2024, we've been very busy, very active. We're starting to see a little bit more compromise from owners who want to get deals done. We've still got a market that's heavily filled with private owners, and they're quite resilient, like yourself. They don't need to necessarily answer to shareholders, answer to stakeholders beyond. They can make decisions and hold when they need to hold and buy when they need to buy. So what are you seeing in your trading in your businesses that are trading in real estate? Are you seeing more volumes? Like you're exposed to apartments, you're exposed to industrial, land, construction. Is there any interesting indicators that you're seeing out of the market that could give us a bit of an insight into what's going to happen for the next couple of years?
There's been a big slowdown in the mum and dad investors that would buy the block of land and then off the plan, and then when it's delivered in 12 to 15, 18 months, then get a builder to build them an investment duplex or, medium density even. That slowed down because of the uncertainty in pricing from builders and whether the builder will even be there when that happens, because so many of them overtraded and couldn't keep up with the things that were happening around them, like the price cost rises and the shortage of labour and tradesmen. We've got a huge shortage of tradesmen right through the country, but in the Hunter we have that shortage. Doesn't mean that any tradesmen that are there that can hold a spanner or pick up a shovel are doing very, very well. And that helps add to the strength of the economy. But we do need more tradesmen, and there will be opening for more tradesmen, and I know the governments have recognised this and are working on it, and more strength to them.
And with that needing more tradesmen, and we touched on it earlier about affordability of Newcastle, and that's always been a big selling point to the markets like Sydney, and it was taken up with the migration to the coast and to regional markets during COVID. Prices have grown, but prices have grown everywhere. Do you still think the affordability equation is as evident as it is now as it was even just a few years ago?
It's a bigger problem now, but we haven't seen anything yet, because to get skilled migrants, they've got to have somewhere to live. To get migrants from countries like in the Pacific, where they can work away and almost like fly in, fly out, but on a country to country scale rather than a city to the country scale. That's going to be very, very impactful on our property market, and we need to be planning for it, but we need to be delivering it, because we can plan and plan and plan and plan, but with no delivery, it's just beating the air.
And talk about beating the air. There's always talk. There has been talk for a decade on a fast rail line to Sydney. Do you think something like that's ever going to materialise? And even at a more local level, what's the likelihood, and maybe this is just more speculation, about extension of the light rail to Broadmeadow and beyond in the medium or short term?
Well, you're talking about your very localised transport solutions, so you're talking about your intercity.
Mm.
But of course, both of them are dependent on people making decisions that within the time frame that they're in office might not you give them any benefit. So
Yeah.
investing in something that doesn't give you a quick fix
Mm.
is more attractive to some people than others. And when you stop to look at it as, why do things take the forever that things take?
Mm.
Maybe we should have 10-year terms of parliament so that people are there long enough to really reap the benefit of the decisions they can make earlier. But that's the other end. That's the other end of the story. But that isn't a Hunter issue. That's a national issue.
Mm.
In fact, that's a world issue because, but it's the best system in the world. So we just have to put up with the the effects it has on us.
In keeping to infrastructure hot button topics, the port, and we touched on it earlier in the frame of its importance to us as a city and as a region. We've been trying to get this container terminal in. There's opportunities for other industries to benefit from that deep water port that we've got, and we're competing with Port Kembla, Port Botany. Versus them, what do you think are the differences that we've got that they don't have, in a brief overview?
Well, Port Kembla got given the car import centre for the state, which was very interesting because from my time in the motor industry, we had dealerships in the valley. I know that the motor industry wasn't happy to come to Newcastle while BHP was here because it's not real conducive to maintaining the level of finish on your Duco.
Yeah, right.
But the state government, when they were closing White Bay in Sydney, for political reasons, sent the car industry to Port Kembla, and guess what? They still got smelter. They've still got steelworks operating there. So I know that was not very well thought through from the industries, the benefit to the industry to get them out of the centre of Sydney. So for political reasons, it ended up down there. But from down there, everything has got to be carted up the escarpment from Port Kembla to get to the market. From up here, you've got none of those problems. We haven't got the fallout from industry. It's gone. Remember, we've got blue skies out there now, clear blue skies. And it's something that its time will come back. But the government interference at that time, for their political reasons, did not do well for Newcastle. But Newcastle didn't fold in a heap over it. We've had as many setbacks as any town, any region, and then some. But we come through it because the diversity is such that we don't have to have it. But all those things are there as opportunities for the future. And when we run out of opportunities, that'll be the time and that'll be the time when your market will contract. Go back in history and look at the townships that grew up during a mining, like gold mining or shale oil or whatever, and you'd have a whole region grow, a whole township grow up around it that aren't even there today. They're not even there. We don't want to be anywhere where our work opportunity, our wealth opportunity, our prosperity is leaving or being superseded by technology. But here we're right at the front of the curve.
Mm.
And with what we've got here, with even medical research in this area, we're so much punching above our weight in so many areas. That's why investing here to us makes so much sense.
Yep, no, I agree. Look, thank you very much for giving us a well-rounded opinion on all things the Hunter. I think it's really important to shine a spotlight on Newcastle and the Hunter for, as I said at the beginning, not just for the wider national audience, just even for remind us as locals that we've got all these exciting and emerging industries that we're working with. Yes, you know, the future of fossil fuels will come to an end, but we've got so much diversity beyond that, and we're very lucky to live where we live. So thanks very much for joining us, Hilton.
You're welcome.